The potential is huge. It's an asset package that was put together by a really well-known geo, a guy called John Gregg. And John was very active in the oil and gas world early in his career, and then discovered probably 40 million ounces of gold over his career as well. This is a basin that has historically produced a fair amount of oil and gas, and that's how he got intrigued with it. Put a great asset package together right in the heart of the fairway, and then it was funded by a group out of Hayward Securities in Vancouver. Two very well-known brokers, David Elliott, Andrew Williams. David Elliott's actually, I think, the only broker that's in the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame. And they're extremely good at identifying assets and projects, and they remain very, very patient. This project took over 8 years to get federal permits for. I actually joined in September, and we got the permits finally in October. Potash is dealt differently from other minerals. It's a long process.
Simon Clark, American Critical Minerals. Good morning to you. How are you, my friend?
I'm very good. Nice to see you, Andy.
Nice to see and meet you. So I am I shouldn't say actually, I'm very interested in your project. Give us a 30,000 foot view here. What do you have? And then, yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah, so we have about 32,500 acres of prime land in the heart of the Paradox Basin in Utah. The Paradox is one of 9 super potash basins globally. It's the only one in the US, and those basins are defined as basins that could potentially produce over 1,000 million tons of potash. So it's a big basin. It's got historic mining. You've got Intrepid, who's been producing for 50 years just up the road from us. And they are essentially America's main potash producer. There's a few little bits and pieces, but the US is dependent on imports for 93% of all potash. So, the potential is huge. It's an asset package that was put together by a really well-known geo, a guy called John Gregg. And John was very active in the oil and gas world early in his career, and then discovered probably 40 million ounces of gold over his career as well. This is a basin that has historically produced a fair amount of oil and gas, and that's how he got intrigued with it. Put a great asset package together right in the heart of the fairway, and then it was funded by a group out of Hayward Securities in Vancouver. Two very well-known brokers, David Elliott, Andrew Williams. David Elliott's actually, I think, the only broker that's in the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame. And they're extremely good at identifying assets and projects, and they remain very, very patient. This project took over 8 years to get federal permits for. I actually joined in September, and we got the permits finally in October. Potash is dealt differently from other minerals. It's a long process. There's a long environmental impact piece done in it. So we're one of only 2 companies that have federal potash prospecting licenses in the Paradox. At a time, obviously, where food security and agricultural security is more and more important to the world. I mean, we're supposed to have 9 billion people on the planet by 2045. Clearly at a time where we're seeing tariffs and, inward-looking regimes and wars and things like that, the supply of potash, I think, is going to be more and more critical. You've seen that obviously firsthand with Ukraine and Belarus, which are 2 historically big producers of potash. So I think the timing is really good, Andy. It's a project that's taken a long time to pull together, but highly prospective, right in the middle of the basin. We have a big 43101 target put together by Agapito, who is the preeminent engineer in the potash space. And to do that, they looked at all the oil and gas wells and logs that also log the potash cycles. And then interestingly, in the last 3 or 4 years, obviously lithium brines have become a big piece of the equation. And interestingly, the Paradox has a lot of salt layers, potash layers, and then beneath those, they have some very significant brines, the Mississippian brines, and that's been actively worked by several companies. One in particular is right next to us to the north and south, called Anson Resources. They've put together a big resource, and they're actually piloting right now with Coke. So although this project was not set up targeted on lithium, lithium has become part of the equation. And again, we know from the gas and oil wells that were drilled on our land and around it that we have that Mississippian brine, and believe that there will be a bigger and bigger opportunity on the lithium side as well.
Okay. So I have a few questions for you in all of this, and talk to me like I have no idea what potash is. What is potash and why is it important? And also, what percentage does the US, I think you said 93%, we get from other parts of the world? What other parts of the world, I believe that, correct me if I'm wrong, would be Ukraine, which is a hotbed right now, obviously, and Canada. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's largely Canada, and bringing it in from Canada, does add somewhere in the region of $70 to $100 a ton, shipping it down. Obviously, at a time of tariffs, that number's probably going to go higher. And then about 38%, I think, historically has been Belarus and Ukraine, and obviously that number has gone down over the last several years. Israel's a pretty big producer, Germany as well, and then parts of Africa. So it's it's very much a key, MOP, which is muriate of potash, is the main potash that's produced. That's what Intrepid produces. That's what we would produce, and that is the key ingredient for most fertilizers that are needed. So, a farmer grows crops for several years in his fields. The land becomes depleted of key nutrients, and potash is the key piece that puts that back. I mean, obviously, there's ammonia and nitrates, another piece that's added into the mix, but the key ingredient for all of the main agricultural fertilizers worldwide is MOP. And it's a market of roughly 60 to 65 million tons a year right now, but growing at a 5% compound annual growth rate. If you believe the stats, I think the numbers are actually a lot bigger than that. There's a lot of farmers around the world who just can't source it or can't pay for it. And so I think that's also a driver for more and more domestic supply globally. So it's a big issue. And obviously the US agricultural sector is growing very quickly as well. And this again is the key ingredient for fertilizers. So having a big project in the only super potash basin in the US that's well connected by rail and road to the key growing areas of the US, I think is going to be more and more relevant.
Yeah. So this is me talking to my viewers and listeners. If you don't know what potash is, and I totally understand, it is not very many people know about it, and they should. What it is, as Simon has said, and again, I'm recapping, Simon, please correct me if I'm wrong, is not only essential, it is required to make fertilizer. And obviously, you need fertilizer not only for a backyard garden, such as myself, but if you're going to scale agricultural production, you have to have potash. And this is right now, it's been, well, the last couple of years, it's been in very unstable or grown in mostly unstable areas. And then Canada with the new administration and the tariffs that are being discussed, it or being implemented, it's going to make it that much more expensive. So that if you're a US investor here or Canadian, it makes US production of potash very, very attractive, if you would, and a need, a critical need. Did I get that right, Simon?
Absolutely, Andy. That's absolutely spot on. It's been put forward to be added to the critical minerals list. Given the amount that's imported, it should definitely be on that list. As you say, without it, the efficiency and the ability to grow crops just declines exponentially. So it's a critical piece of the agricultural infrastructure for sure.
Yeah. So I was going to ask that, you already answered that question. It's not yet classified as a critical mineral, but we assume that will more than likely be the case. Is that correct?
Yeah, Congress actually put it forward to be added to the list. Obviously, the administration changed now. That's not been fully formalized yet. It's a critical mineral in Canada and most parts of the world, and we would expect it to be so shortly in the US, especially again, to our mind, it's critical in everything but name at this stage. When you import, that import number is way up there in terms of other minerals, being that reliant on places around the world, as you point out, in times of tariff and war is more and more complex and difficult.
Yep. Okay. So again, me talking to viewers and listeners here, I am interested. I am not an investor as of yet in American critical minerals. I am looking at them and evaluating. My thesis is I want exposure to agricultural stocks. I do have my own bias and thesis on agricultural, just the production of that and our lack thereof, and also domestic production. We're going to have to do that here within the US a lot more. My question then, let me pivot my question then to you, Simon. Tell me a little bit about the projects, what the project, if you had to pick one or make one more important than the others, is it the potash project? Is it the lithium project? I just thought of this. Why are they related? Is one a byproduct of the other?
Yeah, great questions, Andy. No, that they're not actually byproducts. They're two separate layers in the basin. So potash is typically mined in the Paradox in around 4 to 5,000 feet. That's a perfect depth to mix how deep you have to go to mine it with the temperature gradient. There's a really nice temperature at that level. So the way that it's extracted in the Paradox is the most efficient technique that they use. It's not traditional mining. It's what they call solution mining, which is very similar to in situ recovery in uranium, for example. So rather than having to dig down and excavate and do traditional mining techniques, you effectively drill into the formation, pump liquid in, and then pump out if you like, the potash which has gone into solution, and then you concentrate it into MOP. So it's a highly efficient, effective way of mining. Um, Fortunately, the Paradox has the right characteristics in terms of depth and temperature gradients. It's what's known as the Goldilocks zone in potash mining. So you have that level at 4 to 5,000 feet, and then down at about 7,000 feet, you have the lithium brines, which underpin the various horizons. So they're two separate assets, if you like. One is not a byproduct of the other. Obviously, this was developed primarily as a potash project. It's only, as I say, through the good work of Anson and Koch and other players in the basin that the lithium brine side has become more and more important. So, to answer your question, right now we are more focused directly on the potash, but we are permitted to drill 7 holes federally and on state lands. And the nice thing about these blanket styles of mineralization, with 3 holes, we believe it would convert our exploration target to a resource on the potash side. And in the same holes, we can carry on down to the lithium and also put together a lithium resource at the same time. So they're independent of each other. but we can, certainly as we explore and develop, we can actually do both at the same time at this stage. When you move into production, there are ways that you could potentially produce both from the same holes. In reality, I think they're probably going to be produced separately. I'm excited because my background is lithium. Was the CEO of American Lithium and joined this company because I saw how undervalued and unknown it was, which is not surprising given the period of time it took to get permits. And I really think people are only now realizing just how needed potash is. So I think the timing is really right. But obviously, I'm excited about the lithium as well, especially given there are others doing a lot of heavy work for us in the basin. And to be honest with you, with lithium, I think people have heard of the smack over in Arkansas and Texas, and lithium brines. I believe in the U.S. they're lower grade typically than South America, but as technology improves, they're going to be a major source of lithium. And if you truly can produce at $3,000 to $4,000, on the lithium side, which is what Anson and a number of other players are saying, that's half the price to produce at, say, Thacker Pass in the Claystones, and that's a multi-billion-dollar project to build. So I do think the brines in the US are going to play a bigger and bigger part, and given the economics, could ultimately be the winner. As lithium's obviously had a challenging year or two in the cycle, but it's also clear. I don't know about you, but I see more and more EVs on the road every day. They're a better drive than an ICE. I've got one of each, and it's ultimately going to get there. It's just a question of when. So I think lithium and the need for local lithium in the US is going to become bigger and bigger as we move forward. So long-winded answer. In the short term, I think our focus remains on the potash, but we're fortunate that our neighbors are doing a lot of heavy lifting in the lithium side as well.
No, that's fine. And just so everybody knows, and this is my own do your own due diligence, but I'm actually becoming more and more interested in lithium because you said a keyword in the cycle. It's just really depressed right now. And I like that. I like things that are depressed. I need to like them for different reasons as well. But I am actually very interested in lithium. But I think for myself, and viewers can do their own due diligence right now. I think potash is the potash is the play. A few more questions here. You mentioned permitting. With this
Yeah.
being critical, you're permitted to mine, but what is permitted to produce? What is that ETA on? What does that look like?
Yeah, so we're permitted to explore, prospect, so we can take our all the data that we have from the oil and gas world and the data from the guys drilling around us, but we do have to do that brownfield confirmation drilling ourselves. So we're permitted to do that. So we can do that phase. Obviously, beyond that, when we look to permit the production of potash, that's a process that will likely take a further couple of years. The good news is because of the nature of potash mining and production, the BLM has already marked on our land where they would see us doing potash production. So if you look at a map of our land, look at a map of the Paradox, you can see they've delineated where the high grade potash areas are. They've delineated where they would expect to see potash production implemented, and they've actually set aside the land for that. So they're thinking ahead. It's one of those minerals, they don't just, as I say, award licenses easily. It's a long, long process to get them. But we're well advanced in that, but we will have to go through that final phase of permits to be able to move the project into production. I would hope under this administration, and again, I'm not knocking any politics or taking any sides, but there's no doubt that one of the challenges of mining in the US is the length of time it can take to permit. And I think this administration is certainly going to help that side of things and fast track, which we absolutely need for these critical minerals.
Got it. Let's talk about the stock structure here. How many shares do you have outstanding, fully diluted, and where are your warrants and options written out?
Yeah, so we are, we are at about 54 million shares out. Um,
That's
we have a
reoccurring.
Yeah, we have a 10% option plan. So, about another 5 million on top in terms of options. And we probably have um, about a total of 20 million warrants, which have been issued over the 10-year period that it's effectively taken to set this company up and get it to the point where it has its permits. So, every year money's been raised to keep the land up to date and pay the annual rentals and stuff like that. So we have about 20 million warrants. Most of them are in or close to the money. The majority, there's a bunch at 18 cents. And there is also probably the biggest amount would be at 25. And then there's some at 30 and 35. So a real mix as we, as we spread the word. I was brought in to really take this to the next phase, start to get the word out about what we've got. Obviously, as we move to the right point, get that drilling program done, which is a major milestone for us. But get more eyes on it, get the stock moving to a point where it should be. And I think it's really well positioned for that. And as that happens, I do think we'll see a fair amount of money come in through warrant exercises as well. So I think we get to the point with this company where, it's somewhat self-funding. Until the point, obviously, we pull the trigger on a drill program, that kind of stuff. So, that's the structure. I'd say from an inside group, 15 to 20% would be, roughly where we are. The original founder, John Gregg, my understanding is he hasn't sold a share. He would be roughly around 10% of the company still, and then management and board. We're all relatively new. We were brought in to take this company forward, but we're all, significant shareholders in our own right, and also incentivized through options and RSUs. We don't pay big salaries. Our G&A is really low, and our incentive is to again make money through the equity, and I think that really aligns us well with the shareholder base.
Excellent. So, Simon, if people want more information about you, where do they go? How do they do that? And where are you traded? And what are your ticker symbols?
Yeah, so we're traded right now on the CSE market in Canada. Ticker symbol is KCLI. We're also on the OTC in the US. That listing will be upgraded very shortly to the QB. Um, and we also have a Frankfurt listing. I mean, all that information is available on the website, americancriticalminerals.com. If anyone, wants to contact me directly, I'm not someone who hides behind, walls or puts someone else in the way. Please email me directly. It's sclark@acmineralscorp.com. And, we're good at getting back to you. I have some good colleagues on the corporate development side as well. And, we're actively looking to get more eyes on the stock and obviously let people know what we're doing. We think we're at a really interesting stage in development here at the right time.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Next, I will put all of this in the show notes below. I want to thank you so much, Simon, and love to have you on again.
Thank you, Andrew. Really appreciate it. Take care now.
Bye bye.